Harlem Renaissance, the cultural movement that sparked creativity across African Americans throughout the nation.
By Alyssa Picarello
and Tanner Young.
Long ago, other races had to face harsh segregation, minimal respect, and the Jim Crow laws. Blacks were not treated with the same respect as white people were. Today in America, Jim Crow laws are gone and segregation doesn't exist as much. The Harlem Renaissance was an event that took place from the 1920s to the 1930s in northern cities. Decades before the Harlem Renaissance had started, many blacks still faced slavery. It came to a close around the 1860s, however, and many colored people grasped this opportunity to move away from the living conditions in the South. They moved north due to the amount of labor needed. It had noticeably decreased and many had no jobs. Their migration is known as the Great Migration. They moved to cities including Chicago, Philadelphia, and New York City. The place with the most impact was Harlem, New York. The Harlem Renaissance affected the lives of many races and would forever change the nation. In Harlem, African Americans could start to show their artistic sides. Minorities could finally stand up for one another in Harlem. The Harlem Renaissance is a significant event in American history because it not only was the rebirth of intellectual thinkers, but it allowed blacks to excel in the fields of literature, drama, poetry, and music. African Americans had finally gained the sense of respect that they had been longing for so long.
In Harlem, progress for African Americans was encouraged by intellectual thinkers. Some of these people included W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Alan Locke, Chandler Owen, Carl Van Vechten, and Walter White. Alan Locke had some of the most impact out of them all. He is known as the father of Harlem Renaissance. He and other thinkers encouraged people to do what they love. These thinkers have set an example for young African Americans today. All of these intellectual thinkers have made a big impact on society today in our community.
Poetry and writing also were affected by the Harlem Renaissance. Some famous poets included Gwendolyn Bennett, Jessie R. Fawcett, Virginia A. Houston, Bessie Mayle, Richard Bruce Nugent, Claude McKay, Zora Neale Hurston, and Jean Toomer. One of Zora Neale Hurston's most famous quotes is, "Those that don't got it can't show it. Those that got it can't hide it." These authors decided to write books and get their art published, but they needed white people to back them up. These white people supported the black people. Some of these white people included Carl Van Vechten and Charlotte Osgood Mason. These famous authors are still very well known today for their works of art and for their impact on America.
For the first time, African Americans were branching out into the music industry. The most popular types of new music were jazz and blues. They used instruments that were brass or they used the piano. The piano was considered an instrument for richer people, whereas the brass instruments were for every social class. Many piano players even tried the new style of playing, the Harlem Stride style. Jazz and blues soon became loved by many people. Some of these musicians and composers included Louis Armstrong, the Cold Clo Trio, the Chocolate Dandies, Ella Fitzgerald, C.L. Scott, Belly Smith, William Still, Ronald Hayes, and Burt Williams. Thanks to these people in the 1920s, soon became known as the Age of Jazz. The Harlem Renaissance advanced equality for African Americans. It showed them that if they worked hard, they could make their race more equal to the white race. Although the Harlem Renaissance only lasted for about 10 years until the 1930s, the effect lasted for decades. People continued to be creative and express themselves. Throughout the next decade, many minorities were inspired to stand up for themselves and their cultures. The Harlem Renaissance had had a large impact on the world. Today in America, it doesn't matter what color your skin is, you are somewhat equal to your surroundings. People that made an impact in the Harlem Renaissance show people years later that they're all different races, that they can be creative, and that they can influence more people to follow their paths. The Harlem Renaissance has encouraged many people to appreciate their race and their culture. It has also taught people to set an example for others and to be a role model. In today's society, the works of art of these intellectual thinkers still live on. As Philip Randolph was right when he said, "Freedom is never given, it is won." The black people fought for their freedom and equality. They just didn't ask for it. If the Harlem Renaissance hadn't occurred, there would not be a variety of artistic people. African Americans that lived during the Harlem Renaissance have showed black people today that they can make a difference in the world. They have finally gained their respect from whites and given opportunities to show what they could do. Although racism is greatly limited today in society, some people still believe that minorities are not equal in rights as those who are white. From Oprah Winfrey to Morgan Freeman, determined people have been given great respect and are looked up to by many of all races as role models. Oprah Winfrey is one of the most influential women in the world, and Morgan Freeman is a well-known actor throughout the nation. They, along with many others, made a large impact on our society, and people of all races will continue to do so.
Hey there. You know what the Harlem Renaissance is? You know what I'm gonna teach you. It's better than heaven. Let's go. This is the Harlem Renaissance, an African-American movement of art and singing songs and jazz music. It's a time of ideas and poetry when people started noticing the advancements musically and socially. It took place in Harlem, a neighborhood in New York, in the 1920s when blacks moved north after the First War to find jobs and opportunities, trying to forever outlaw lynches in communities. The NAACP heavily influenced politics and made sense of all the nonsense. The Harlem Renaissance united African Americans and gave birth to many famous musicians such as Louis Armstrong, who played the trumpet, or Ella Fitzgerald, who sung hits. From Duke Ellington to Count Basie, from Fletcher Henderson to Dizzy Gillespie. Because before the Renaissance it was war and evil, racism and discrimination of all colored people. It was hard for black families to make money and survive. But after the Renaissance they could conjure up a dime, and it ended in the 30s when the Great Depression grew, which was the point of turning that threw the movement askew. But it still led the way for many black poets and artists who continued to guide people through common hardships. Yep. That's it.